Welcome to this demonstration of FileSmart. In this video, we'll be walking you through all of the key functionality the system has to offer and how it works seamlessly alongside your existing Microsoft 365 environment. This demonstration will look at how a human resources team can securely and efficiently manage sensitive employee personnel files in one place. However, this is only one example. Once FileSmart is installed within your SharePoint environment, you can create as many different configurations as you need for each department that manages sensitive and structured documents and records. Let's jump straight in. I've selected the HR configuration. You'll notice the look and feel is still very much SharePoint, and it will follow your organization's branding guidelines. And from an end user's perspective, they may not even realize that they've just moved from a SharePoint experience to a FileSmart enhanced experience for the more structured documents and records. You'll also note there was no request for login credentials, as everything is managed centrally through Microsoft Entra ID, the same credentials you use when accessing SharePoint natively, or Teams and Outlook and any of the other Microsoft applications. Now let's move into searching for an employee. So one of the value adds that FileSmart brings on top of SharePoint is the opportunity to have very structured and contextual methods of searching for documents and records, but also storing them as well in a way in which guarantees that you have the correct labels, retention and metadata applied to every document that you upload. So in this example, we have a HR example where the team have a load of common terminology that they already use in one of their other existing systems, their HR system. So this drop down here mirrors some of the key metadata that organization has against each employee, from unique IDs to more generic metadata such as their name, first and last. As a quick note, all of the drop-downs, searches, bookmarks and views, they're all configurable and they can all be tailored to your organization. So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and search for an employee ID, and I've intentionally searched for a more generic term here with just the prefix that this organization uses when numbering their employee IDs. So I've got a series of results that have now been returned. What we typically do here is either an integration with an existing third-party system, such as the HR system, or it could be a lookup to your Entra ID. And what we want to do is to pull back all of the demographic data that you have against your employees. Now, please note, this is just an example for HR. If you've got another department, such as finance, it might be that your lookup for that configuration might be a finance system, and likewise for any other departments. So this is configurable depending on the use case. The reason we do this is because we don't want to create a duplicate set of data, and we want to trust the information that's being pulled across, and we want to be in sync with the key systems that that department uses. So what I can do here is I can find the employee that I want to find the documents and records for, because I've got a series of metadata that's being pulled across from that existing system. So even with a more generic search, I can see, okay, this is John Doe and it is the person within marketing, and I can identify that's the correct person that I've been searching for. Alternatively, the more precise your search results, so your search criteria are, the more precise your search results will be there in turn. So you can see here with a very specific search, I've returned just one record as I've used the unique identifier. I'm going to go ahead and click into John Doe's record. Now we have a single view of all the documents and records which relate to this employee, John Doe, and everything has been permission trimmed in the background, so I can only see the documents and records that I have permission to see. This strategy moves us away from deep nested folder structures with huge SharePoint URLs that often lead to data duplication, complexities with permissions, and many other headaches. So now we've given the organization the opportunity where everyone can search for John Doe in the same way, and they'll simply retrieve the documents and records that they have permissions to see. In this demo, I'm going to break down FileSmart into three general areas that you can see here on the layout. So on the right, we have the system's inbuilt document viewer. On the left, we have various controls and automations that are all related to document activities. And then on the top here, we have the metadata sync, which I mentioned previously in this example with the HR system, and various opportunities to be able to search and navigate documents and records as well for users. I'm going to go ahead and start with the search navigation tools. So in the first instance, we have already created a more contextual search where I can now retrieve everything to do with John Doe within a single search criteria. In other videos, we may cover how this could be more broadly used enterprise-wide. You can still use SharePoint's search capabilities to look, for example, for all offboarding documents across a number of different employees, and this could be further trimmed by any of the metadata that FileSmart has helped you apply, such as gender, demographics, and departments, etc. But for today's example, we're already in the context of John Doe, and we have two levels of further search capabilities. So one is our basic search, and you'll see here across the top left-hand side, we have these different sections which are quite similar to perhaps previous personnel files which were paper-based, or it could even be very akin to a folder structure where you're going to navigate and drill down into a more refined search criteria. So for example, let's go into the onboarding documents. You can see that the UI presented to me that there were 7 documents within that category, and as soon as I've clicked into onboarding documents, it's broken that down further again, and I've got various document types such as contract documents, identification proofs, and background checks. It's worth noting that all of these sections and document types are configurable. Nothing is hard-coded within the system, so we can use the document types that your organization has, along with all the permissions and retention schedules that you have documented as well. So I can, as a user, go down into a particular document type. So I can navigate to John Doe and then find all of his identification proofs as an example. Apologies, obviously this here, we're using some demo example documents, but this could be a Word document, PDF, but it equally could be a scanned image of a passport. FileSmart does support virtually all modern day file types. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the All Records tab. So you can see here, it's just refreshed my search. I'm seeing all the documents and records that I have permissions to see for John Doe. And I'm going to talk you through more of the advanced search criteria that we can provide within FileSmart as well. So this button here, Refine Documents, this allows us to create any type of search across the documents and records that we have here, or any combination of searches as well. So that could include free text search that will look across any metadata that document contains, but also the information within the document itself, which will be indexed. And then here are just some examples of further criteria we might want to combine with that search as well, such as a date range for when that document or record might have been created, any titles or keywords, any statuses. But again, I'll just highlight this is purely a demo example for today's video. And if there's any refiners that you would commonly use, we can apply those here as well. It's a really simple thing to do via the configuration portal. Okay, so to run a very simple search, I'm going to look for the term employment and I'm going to click refine. You'll see that what the system goes and does there, and it returns results relatively quickly as well, as we are looking up our own index of metadata which we're holding, but it would be contained within your Azure environment, so there's no data being processed by any third party. But the results are fairly quick, as it won't index every document individually as SharePoint does. It has some memory based on how the system has been set up for you. So you can see here it's looked at any document properties, i.e. the title, or any metadata that document contains. If the term employment appears in any of those areas, it will find any documents with that search result and return it. Obviously, this may in practice be a more specific search that you've done. But then moving over here to the document viewer, we will talk about the document viewer in a bit more detail in just a moment, but to show you very quickly, it's also pulled up where the term employment has been, where it's contained within the document itself. So even in scenarios where you have large volumes of documents that you want to index and place into the system, which may not have extremely granular metadata, you will always have the opportunity for users to at least search across the contents of the document itself. Okay, I'm going to remove those searches for now, just to come back to the master set of documents. And that at a very high level concludes the 2 search options that you have within FileSmart, the contextual method to search for John Doe in general, a breakdown of those different sections, which is often for users is quite a familiar experience based on what they currently do today, moving to a very similar system in the future. But then you still have all of the advanced controls that SharePoint offers you around searching for the contents of those documents or any of the metadata. Next, I'm going to talk you through how FileSmart ingests documents, whether that's a manual upload through SharePoint directly, or using the Outlook add-in if it's an email attachment as an example, or it could be an automation, something that we migrate over at the beginning from a third-party source using the migration tool, or maybe an automation that once an approval is completed and John Doe's onboarding actions are completed, we can automatically generate a PDF into the system. So there's many different ways documents can be ingested. For today's demo, I'm going to show you one of the most simplest examples where we're uploading a document manually. And the key point which I want to show you is how we find the balance between not asking end users to do too much work, because that becomes a difficult change management conversation. It also becomes a bit tricky to maintain that over the many years you might use a system if you're having processes that are too cumbersome for users. But at the same time, particularly with sensitive documents and records, whether that's HR or finance or many other departments, we need to make sure that our employees are filing them correctly. So they're not using the wrong names, they're not placing them in the wrong folder, they're not saving them as duplicates locally. They're always looking at the most up-to-date version, and just as importantly, they're not deleting or changing documents and records which you need to preserve. So this is how the system does it. Within FileSmart, we only ever ask users to give us 2 bits of information. So one is the context, and in this example, I've already selected the context because that's John Doe. And the second piece of information is just tell me what type of document you are trying to upload. So if I was to select contract documents, you'll see here on the right, all of this information is just preloaded. So all of that grey information is metadata that we're looking up from an existing source, that it means based on logic we've inputted within the system, every time we upload a document for John Doe and it's a contract document, I know I need to pull all of this information across. So within that individual document, not just the container, we now have metadata to know John's in marketing, we know his employment type is currently active, and we know his status is permanent. So any of that information we might have in our HR system, we can pull across, and we can now use that for search criteria to find these documents and records in future. And we can also use it to drive any retention schedules or in-place hold policies as well, to make sure these documents do not get deleted if they shouldn't, and also to ensure that they are deleted when the expiry is hit. These great white options here, again, everything is just configurable to your configuration once we understand the setup that your department would need. But these are some examples where maybe the department needs some optional metadata fields. So if this wasn't a permanent member of staff, maybe there's an expiry date that you would want to manually input. And maybe there's a status. If they're still going through that onboarding process, there might be manual statuses that your department wants to add to have a quick view of those. And they in turn could drive different actions and notifications through the Power Automate toolset that FileSmart is natively integrated with. So I'm not going to upload a document here, but it's just an example. One of the key things that FileSmart is doing is making sure that no document does get uploaded, whether that's manual or automated, without the required metadata. And that just means you've got a maintainable system that's structured and organized, and it powers all of those search and retention policies that your organization needs. It really lends itself to documents where you need to ensure compliance. Okay, I'm now going to move on to some of the controls here on the left-hand side. And the first thing I will mention before going through them is that all of these commands and controls, they can be turned on and off if you need to remove any, and they can also be switched on and off depending on your rights as a user. And that becomes very important. Perhaps there are records that you do need the option to be flexible enough to change and move around, but perhaps you want to restrict that to just key departmental leaders or records management teams, etc. So all of that is configurable. So I'm just going to go through some of these commands, and I'll be very brief on some of the ones that are relatively self-explanatory. So we saw bookmarks earlier on the previous screen. If there's a document or record that you're working on quite regularly, or if you want to actually bookmark the entire employee at the employee level, you can do that. So there's just some configurable options there around bookmarks, so you can find those documents again very quickly. When you share documents and records, everything is first of all going to be respecting any of the permissions that you've set up at an Entra ID level. So when I joined the business, I would have had a particular role. That would be a role-based access control within Entra ID. And as soon as I'm set up as the organization, I'm going to be provisioned my access to SharePoint, Teams, Office 365, etc. And I'm also going to be given permissions to my particular areas within FileSmart. So if I try and share records, the default of FileSmart is that it is more structured and controlled than SharePoint. So by sharing a record, if a user doesn't have access to view that record, they will simply get a notification by email, but they will need to be given access before they can view it. The default in SharePoint is that by doing that command, I would be sharing the file itself. We can make that work that way around as well, but often our customers find it really important that users aren't sharing documents they shouldn't. So that might be a control that's controlled. Download document and print document. So again, these are relatively self-explanatory. The only things I'll add here is that downloading documents, you may have disclaimers that you want to add before the users do that. As soon as they download the document, it becomes uncontrolled. And if there's any information they need to be aware of before doing that, you can place any text within the system that suits your organization. You can also simply switch these commands off as well if you don't want anyone to download these documents. Same explanation for printing. Various controls that you'll be familiar with from normal printing operations, and we do have the option as well to add watermarks. So if you do need to go through any processes where printing is required, but you want them to know it's uncontrolled, or you want to stamp any information to that document, that can be done at the watermark level as well. This can also be driven through Power Automate as well. If you want any of these commands to be automatically completed, that could be a conversation with us to create certain Power Automate flows that will do that. Next command is the document properties. So when I mentioned that every document itself, not just the container, is going to receive the metadata that it requires, you can see here this is all of the metadata that's been applied to that document. And I have a records management access in this example. So perhaps other users wouldn't have the edit button, but for me, I do. You can still see much of the commands are grayed out because things like employee ID, as we mentioned before, that's coming from the HR system. So I don't want the opportunity to be able to change that. I want it to be aligned with our source of truth. And if that employee ID changes in the HR system, it can be reflected here. There are some nuances we won't go into in this video around records preservation. There may be certain occasions where the employee ID does change, but you want this document in particular to keep its legacy ID because that was the truth in time. All of that is considered within the system as well, but we won't go through that in detail in this video. If I need the option to reclassify documents, perhaps it's been uploaded incorrectly or there's some terminology that's been missed, I can do that as a admin user or records management user. And you can see very quickly as I changed the document type, it's a very fast refresh, but if the metadata it should have now is different because of it's now a different document type, that will all be reflected as well. And you can see here, those optional controls I had earlier don't appear because for background checks, we don't have that type of metadata that's required. Okay, I'm just going to come off that now rather than click save and come down to the next option here, which is compliance. So the admin controls for how we create retention policies, we won't go through in detail in today's demo, but the key point is that we have retention built directly within this platform. So if you do have some of the Microsoft licensing SKUs such as E5 that will give you the opportunity to automate retention policy application and labels, you can do that at a Microsoft level. All of your documents and records in FileSmart will be saved within SharePoint, so any permissions and any policies that you apply at the top level will waterfall down into this environment as well within FileSmart. There is a huge value add for organizations that haven't yet bought some of those Microsoft SKUs. Often we find customers that actually save a lot of money simply by going down the FileSmart route as opposed to the licensing upgrade route, because we can create retention policies and in-place holds and immutable records configurations within FileSmart as part of our functionality as well. The retention policies are very flexible, so they could go from as simple as soon as John Doe goes from employment type active to inactive, that could trigger a retention policy at the container level so that all of John Doe's records after, for example, 7 years could be deleted, or they can even go through a more custom workflow, perhaps a notification to a records management team or a departmental leader to have a final approval of whether to delete those documents or to extend the retention. So it's very configurable as all of those custom workflows are driven through Power Automate. We can activate or trigger those retention policies based on any metadata we have within the system. So employment type was just one. Maybe in the HR system, we move John Doe to inactive, and that will now kick off the retention policies. We can also do more complex rules. So let's say we had John Doe's age and he was an apprentice, and your retention policies were different if that individual turns 18 compared to when they were perhaps 17. We can have very bespoke rules within the system as well that take into consideration things like date. But we won't cover that in detail now. If there's any further questions, please feel welcome to kind of reach out to your point of contact at OASIS. Let's keep looking through. So the final commands here that we have on the left, copy and delete. So those are features that I believe are self-explanatory, but another key note to mention, as I've said before, is these could be switched off. So if you wanted any of these records to have the immutable status or to be preserved, things like delete or even copy could be switched off, and that could be done at the user level. We have a check-in, check-out capability. So if I want to be working on this document and restricting others from editing that document as I work through it, we have a controlled mechanism here to check that document in or check that document out. And you can see here the system has asked me to leave a message. So that could be helpful for audit purposes. We'll keep an audit log of any actions that occur across that document. Which does make me think to mention actually the audit history that's available within the admin portal, which is very granular. In today's demonstration, there was loads of actions I've done so far. I've logged in, I've accessed John Doe's container, I've clicked through various documents, I've edited certain properties. All of that and a very granular detail will be captured in the audit history, and that data could be used to generate reports or any audit trail certificates if needed. So I'm going to come back out. I'm not going to check the document in or out today in that example, but there is the functionality to do that. I'm going to come over to the run trigger option. So this is our integration directly into Power Automate. Power Automate is Microsoft's low-code, no-code tool for creating any type of automation or document workflow. I've got a quick example here around kicking off a document workflow for approval, but I could create anything I want to in that low-code platform, from merging documents, requesting signatures, extracting key information, automatically redacting sensitive information or personal information. So there's anything that you can build in Power Automate, you can build here. And that can be done by OASIS, but it equally could be built by yourself or any other Microsoft partner. So that is not a vendor lock-in technology. We do have one USP that we add on top that goes above and beyond what SharePoint and Power Automate can do. One of the limitations you do have currently within the Microsoft stack is you can't select multiple documents for automations. And in our system, you could select one or all of documents, and you could run that automation and maybe send off an approval process for a series of documents all in one go, and that might be merged into a document pack at the end. But again, that's all flexible and configurable to anything you would want to create. And the last command here at the bottom is briefcase. So briefcase is all around creating a controlled document pack or a personal container. This could be used for things like freedom of information requests, subject access requests, audits. It's when you want to create a copy of a certain subset of records to be shared internally or externally, but you want to make sure they're very controlled, and maybe you want to take them through certain processes before you do share them. So one quick example, I can create new briefcases, or I could add to an existing one. So you can see here within my organization, we're already creating freedom of information requests and a subject access request for John Doe. So I might choose to add to that existing container, or I can create a new one myself. So maybe I've had a SAR come in for John Doe. I'll give a brief description. Obviously, I'll type something in very generic for today, brief description of that briefcase. And then importantly, I can have a due date for when that's pack of documents need completing, and that could drive a series of notifications or actions using the Microsoft toolset. And then I can also apply a custom retention date as well. So one of the challenges that SharePoint on its own might present is that when you're creating these document packs, often users will download them separately, create a new container or area for those documents. So already you have a duplicate that is quite difficult to track. Or a user may share an entire folder, and there might be the rest of the organization doesn't know what's been shared. They end up adding more documents to that container, and it just introduces risk. So it's quite difficult to monitor what's been created and shared, and it's also quite difficult to remember to delete them once those document packs have been created. So In this example, I want to complete my subject access request by April the 16th, but then I also want all of these documents to be securely and permanently deleted after they've met their purpose with the customer retention date in August. I can make links to my briefcase public, or I can password protect them and make them private, or I can use the Entra ID controls I would normally use within SharePoint as well to select individual email addresses, internally or externally, to share that briefcase with. Okay, I'm going to come out of that for now and go to a briefcase that we do already have set up, and it will show you another way to navigate to these briefcases. So one option I have is to select this briefcase tab and see the ones I've created before. This same icon was also available at my very early home screen as well, so I could have jumped straight to that subject access request. Okay, now I've just moved into a briefcase that is in progress and is currently being made. It's a compiled SAR for information around John Doe. So maybe this is to do with a court hearing, and we need to compile our records and information and evidence as well before we attend. And you can see here I've got a much more stripped down view, and this is all configurable. I've decided that actually there isn't many things that need to occur within this briefcase experience, so I've just got the opportunity to add new documents, delete documents until I'm happy. And perhaps there are certain bits of information like this redaction here, the removal of the person's name. You might want to securely edit or redact these documents. You can do that within the document viewer, which we're about to look through in just a moment. And then you can make sure these changes only occur on that secure copy of the record that you created, so you can keep their original record immutable and in place in its original location. Once the document pack's created, if you want to merge them into a single PDF, you can, or if you want to add them to a zip, you can. Of course, you may choose to add those disclaimers in again to let the users know any printing or downloading will take your document out of that controlled environment. So of course, their second option is to share direct links to these briefcases to a very select group of audience. Okay, so I've just came back to the home screen of John Doe, and I'm now going to go through the third part we mentioned, which is this document viewer. So if I click this enlarged screen here, you'll see that it's opened up the document into a bigger screen view, and this particular document is a PDF. If there are other file types, whether that's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the document viewer has various add-ons that we can switch on to directly edit Word documents as an example. There is also media players for any videos, and that does include the opportunity to actually annotate or leave commentary around those videos as well. So there's a lot of controls within this document viewer we may not cover today. In this example, we're going to be looking at a typical PDF. Many customers do actually choose to store a variety of file types but render them as a PDF. So if this was a Word document and I did not want to edit those Word documents because they should be immutable, the FileSmart system will automatically render it as a PDF when users are trying to view that document. Okay, so let's have a look at the basic controls that Document Viewer offers you. The main purpose of the Document Viewer is to very easily see your documents side by side as you navigate through the system to create a better user experience, but it's also to avoid users having to download documents into a third-party application like Adobe, as an example, to do very simple PDF manipulation activities. So what I can see here is this is a one-page document. But on this pane, if it was multi-page and I wanted to rearrange the documents, you can with a very simple drag and drop type activity. And maybe I need to add new pages. I've perhaps scanned an element of my document. It's missing certain information that I want to merge. You also have these page manipulation capabilities here to insert new pages, replace pages, like for like, if a certain page is incorrect, or you can extract a series of the pages from this PDF, which is kind of more commonly called split. For example, I want to move this into multiple documents. If I was going to insert pages, the controls are very intuitive. Selecting the range, so I want the documents to be inserted after page 1, for example, or in between a series of pages. And the upload is no different to how you typically upload to many applications, either dragging and dropping directly from your desktop, or you can browse your files. There is also a series of viewing controls as well. So if you want to view pages side by side in a double page experience, if you want to open up 2 files simultaneously, so maybe there's a contract and I'm looking for differences across 2 versions, There's lots of controls around viewing documents in different ways, rotating pages, and how you navigate and scroll through them, whether that's continuous or page by page. So lots of controls there. I won't go through all of this part in detail, as I'm sure having a play around with our document viewer, if you do get the chance, it again is very self-explanatory. But if I want to navigate through the page by panning or dragging my way through, I can zoom in and out. So lots of controls there and different ways to select bits of information as well that might be indexed. I'm now going to go through these 4 options here at the top. So I've been on the view screen. This is all about moving around, navigating through the PDF. But I also have the opportunity to annotate as well, and that can be either with text options. So you can see here there's different colors, different opacities. You can give the hex code if you have a very specific color you want to use, different thicknesses, line weighting. There's lots of controls here that our users can use and play around with to get a feel. And you can also leave comments as well. So if I need to leave any commentary against the document or record, I can. It will be so this is a demo example that we've got here, but it will be using your user account details. You can leave comments, filter through comments at different users, and have various different statuses as well for the comments that you're putting through, such as accepted, rejected, or there could be tasks such as in progress or completed. So lots of controls there to do with commenting within the document or record. Same concept with your shapes. If there's certain areas I want to highlight, we've seen this used in many different use cases, from construction companies marking up drawings out there on the field to simply HR or finance teams highlighting bits of information that might be missing or leaving commentary as they go through. I won't go through any of those details today. Again, these are all very simple and easy to use, very self-explanatory as you use them. I'm going to move on to the redact option here, which is the 4th of the 4 on top. This is again just the simplest version of our document viewer. We also have many more features around Word document editing, even all the way to looking at construction CAD drawings where you can see 3D models and measure certain angles and zoom in into a very low level. So there's lots of functionality that can be bolted on, but this is today's the standard functionality that the document viewer provides you. So redaction is one of those standard pieces of functionality. You can see here as I've selected that option, it can look for certain patterns. So it might go and select any opportunity where there's an email that's been placed within the document, or credit cards and phone numbers. Equally, I can search for a term individually. So you can see here as I typed in Jane, it's located where Jane's been used. But if I use the more generic term as well, such as employee, you can see here employee turns up a series of times throughout the document. So I can select all of them to redact that information for every time that term appears, or I can select individuals, and it helps me navigate through them quite easily to see which ones that I'm looking at currently. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a redaction just for those 2 terms. There's 2 instances of employees. So you can see here it's now moved over a redaction, and that has been hard burnt onto the document itself. So I can't Control F and find that information underneath. You can also change any of the color options for redaction. So black is the default, but if you wanted a different color or a different type of redaction, you can. And one thing that's quite important to mention when it comes to redaction is the opportunity to make sure you keep that original document immutable. So this can be customized for your workflows, but in this example, I'm simply going to save a copy. You can see here it's given me a prefix already around it being a modified copy, and therefore it'll create a second one with that prefix. I can change this terminology myself as well if I want to call it a redaction. And another way we may have done this is where we looked previously at the briefcase functionality. If you are to move this document into a briefcase, that would have created a secure copy of that document. So therefore, any redactions that you may have done on that document itself would be preserved. It would be applied only to the copy, and the original would be preserved. Last of all, we're going to take a look at FileSmart's intelligent document processing capabilities. In this example, we've actually slowed down the process just to be able to talk you through the steps that occur. In practice, the whole the whole piece would be automated, which makes it quite difficult to demo because all you would see is an invoice comes in, information is pulled out, a match is made, and then a finance team is notified. So actually we've almost had to slow it down just to take a look at the steps that happen. So in this example, we have a finance team with a shared email inbox. They regularly receive invoices from their various suppliers, and they come through as attachments on those emails. So what we have is an automation that is driven through Power Automate. As soon as an email is received from one of those shared inboxes, it's picked up and it's processed through AI technologies and OCR technologies that will add a text layer to the document so it's readable, and then it will extract key information from that document that would typically have been a manual process to identify. So in this model here, and this is just one example, they can be trained for invoices, but they could be trained for a plethora of different documents, from receipts to employee records, or very niche and unstructured documents as well. It's all about just creating the model that works for your document. This one is quite a simple example. So we're pulling out key information like the date, who the invoice is sent to, information about your own company, and of course some of the values down here, the numeric values of how much the invoice is worth and the VAT totals, etc. So I'm going to come back to the FileSmart interface. When these documents are coming through, they're being automatically indexed and they're automatically extracting key information, and this will look up to a finance system in this example, where if I have just had an invoice coming through with a total of £1,560, if that corresponds to a purchase order that's within my finance system, and the same supplier is involved with the same invoice number or PO number, then it's going to make a match. And then what this might look like for an organization is thousands of these invoices are coming through monthly or yearly. The system is processing almost 98% of them automatically, doing your match and your lookups against your finance system, and then giving your finance team a notification to say, these are the invoices received this week or this month or bi-monthly, depending on your preferred cadence, and then these payments can be made, removing a load of manual effort to process and review these documents. To slow this down, we've almost shown you an example where a model has extracted the information, and it could be in the 1, 2, or 3% of occasions we're unable to process a document correctly. So what you can see here in this triage area is the invoice itself that has been extracted and had the text layers applied so we can read the information within the document. And then the model, and in this example it's called Invoice AI Model 2. This has been trained to pull out key information, and you can see that information here that it believes it's pulled out. So it's the invoice number from here, it's the total value from here, and these are all demonstration examples. So if you had different metadata that you would typically pull out for your invoice processing, all of that part is configurable. In this example, it's taking care of a situation where your AI model may not be 100% certain that it's extracted information correctly. Let's say we came onto this invoice and it had extracted an incorrect value, or it hadn't been able to extract that value. We have this triage area to handle those exceptions, and it gives your team a notification to say, here are a small number of documents, please review and make any kind of final changes your side, please, before sending through approval. So if the invoice value was missing or incorrect, we have a quick view here using the document viewer that we saw in other parts of the system to be able to see the invoice side by side. I may simply correct that value of that invoice, but having looked at the document, it is an invoice we're expecting. It does correspond with a PO within our finance system, so actually I'm happy with that. I want to convert that document to a PDF and send it over to FileSmart for archiving and to add to a list of notifications of payments that are due. So this is a very flexible part of the system. You can train AI models for very common use cases like invoices, but they can also be used for very complex scenarios like project drawings, patient records, financial documentation. So these models are very flexible. The more structured they are, the more simpler they are to deploy, but even the more complex and unstructured documents can have models such as this one here trained for them as well. All of this, the documents and data, is held in your environment, as is everything else within FileSmart. And we're using Microsoft's preferred technologies for indexing and data extraction, but giving you the tools to have a nice, simple, easy interface to be able to train those models and handle exceptions, all within the same system that we've looked at across the rest of this demo. And that brings us to the last part of today's demonstration. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's any further questions, please feel welcome to get in touch with your representative at OASIS, and we'd be more than happy to organise a one-to-one demonstration that's tailored to your requirements.